not allowed to complain when you're buying a $36 cocktail on a Thursday night happy hour when your money's tight. You're not allowed to complain when you've got Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and fucking Paramount Plus when your money's tight. You're not allowed to complain when you've got 8 different Kith and Essential hoodies when your money's tight. When I was growing up and money was tight, we looked poor. My homies had 1 pair of sneakers. So did I. For fucking 3 years. So what's happened is a combination of things. We've become, unfortunately, too materialistic. Again, motherfuckers had banged up used cars when our money was tight when I was growing up. Everybody's leasing new cars now. Everybody's credit is all fucked up. Everyone's in huge debt. People lived within their means in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. We've lost our way. People are buying dumb shit when they don't have money to impress people that they don't even like. We've become insecure. We've become way too nosy. We keep up with the Joneses, let alone the Kardashians. And we're fucking lost out here. And we need to get back to humility, to family, to fucking simplicity.
I'm short. I'm bald. I can't get any hoes. I've been fighting my entire life.
You can get hoes. You can get hoes.
Ouch. Right in the heart with a silver bullet.
Yeah.
I think they plotting on man. Don't wipe their feet when they enter the L.A.R. I feel a cold stare.
What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Subscriber died trying. You see the thumbnail. More importantly, you saw the clip. Shout out to Gary V for that. I'm glad he said it in a way that needs to be said. So this is going to be like cost of living or inflation versus materialism, because people think that it's one doesn't involve the other in a sense, because the rise in cost of living and people aren't accustomed to the life that they're accustomed to isn't the same. But it's at the same time, I can say from my childhood to adulthood that people have a hard time cutting back now. People have a hard time living below their means or at their means. That's the thing about credit and the rising credit debt and whatnot. And these companies are also taking advantage of knowing that consumers haven't decided like, hey man, I can't afford this, I'm not doing it. I'm seeing it a little bit more now because I'm seeing a lot more I see a lot of people in cheap cars now. You know what I'm saying? They buying that Kia. I'm not, look, you can't, what you mean I'm buying a base model regular car for $40,000-$50,000? Like, I'm not doing it. You get what I'm saying? Like, we're not doing it. So if I get a new car and it's gonna be a Cube or a Juke, or you know what I'm saying, I'm gonna get the $20,000 joint, because you're not finna do me like this. But the materialism is becoming a problem. Like you said, that like I can't live without my subscriptions. I can't live without going out. And a lot of that for all of you young adults. And I'm gonna spread it out to later, but for all you young adults that's accustomed to, say you're living, you grew up with your parents, you live with your parents, and because you were living with your parents, you could use their stuff and you can afford some of your own stuff. That doesn't mean as an adult you're going to be able to afford that same stuff. You get what I'm saying? Once you have to pay rent, you're going to start cutting back. Once you got to pay for the food, you got to start cutting back. Like, there was I would say, a rite of passage in a sense from teenagers, from I graduated high school at 17, so, but it's normally 18, but from college age, 18 to in your 20s, where you might have been eating good at your parents' house, but you might not be eating good on your own. You might be able to do all these things when you're with your family, but when you're on your own, you're not going to be able to afford those things. And you see people who just can't deal with that. You can't deal with it. Like I see a lot of adults now commenting about eggs. Man, eggs are expensive. And I'm like, well, just don't eat eggs. Like, that's my mental. Like, I ain't gotta eat it. I don't have to eat no eggs. I grew up on eggs. Grits are cheaper. You might want to buy grits. The cereal's expensive. Well, do what we did. Get the knockoff cereal. Get the cheap cereal. Don't buy, you know, don't buy the expensive. Don't buy the crunch berries. Don't buy the frosted flake. You got to buy some knockoff stuff. And people have a hard time like that. I'm not used to that. I'm accustomed to these type of clothes and those type of clothes. I remember like we was wearing t-shirts and Target button-up shirts. We'll get the cheap stuff. In the 90s, well, in Chicago, they had the Coogee sweaters and people want them, but they had the knockoffs that was cheap. Hey, we get that. Hey, it is what it is. That's the issue. The materialism is adding to the inflation and adding to the high cost of living because, some of y'all go, I can't, I can't live in a cheaper janky apartment or janky. I just can't do it. And it's like, well, you got to remember, since you can't do it, the bills are gonna be tight. Give me 1 second. Cut it out. Cut it out. Cut it out. My dog's whining. If you hear that, that's what he's doing. But you don't want to live in these certain places and environments. And sometimes you got to live where you can afford to live. You get what I'm saying? A lot of people, that we've gotten to the point where people have been living beyond their means for so long that they've raised their kids to live beyond their means, and they think that's normal. You know what I'm saying? And some people go, well, there was a time where, like he's talking about people living in the 60s, 70s. I'm going to be honest with you. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. So there was a lot of poverty in America, a gang of poverty. Um, but don't get it twisted. His community was living a whole lot better than mine because they were able to double and triple dip. And I say that for a reason, is because even though there was a lot of poverty and the 60s was still Jim Crow, 50s, 60s, still Jim Crow. They had some remnants from Jim Crow to the 80s and 90s. So that's just what it is. But the ultimate issue of that was the government didn't owe so much money. The national debt wasn't as extreme as it is now. So a lot of people living in their means or below their means, even if people were poor, the issue was the government wasn't as crazy in debt. You get what I'm saying? It wasn't. It's gotten to this point now. So because it's at this point, the inflation is worse. The cost of living is worse. And it is. But people don't get it twisted, because in the 80s, the interest rates was crazy. I was a kid in the 80s. The interest rates was crazy. Like some of the some of these interest rates that you see now in America, where credit cards 24% and 17.99, that type of stuff. That was the 80s in general. Interest rates was just out of pocket in the 80s. They was just, hey, we gonna get you. So America is basically in the 80s now, with, let's just say, late 90s, 2000, 2010 wave of materialism. Because now the materialism is gotta be, if it's not unaffordable, it's unsustainable. Because people, that's the issue. Like, we got to a point where people thought it was just going to be infinite growth. And so because it's infinite growth in my mind, I could be more materialistic, because, hey, we're going to always have this. We're going to always have that. And it doesn't dawn on you, you're not going to always have things. That's not true. People are going to go out of business. There's going to be shortages of things. The prices of things are going to go up drastically. And you're going to have to make some tough decisions. You get what I'm saying? You're going to have to make some tough decisions. Y'all gonna be selling some of those, you know, expensive clothes. That you realize, I'm stuttering like this. You realize some of these clothes have been on they've been on consignment, and you can, basically pay them off and buy used clothes. Like, hey, bro, it's for a reason. Even with high fashion and high luxury items, it's got to the point where, hey man, we got to sell the used stuff too, because the stuff ain't flying off the racks like it used to be. Recently there was in the last few years there was a crash in the watch market. People can't afford Rolexes, you know, APs, and Hublot went down, and uh Vacheron Constantine, and what was it? Is that LP? Is it L Zhang? Lang and Zhang? Lang and Zhang? Sorry, Brigo and all those other watches. Ironically, I know some of the names, right? But you know, a lot of this stuff is out of pocket now. Like, you can't eat a watch. You can't eat a luxury bag. You can't eat a luxury car. That's not gonna, you see people drowning in thousands and tens of thousands, some people hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And really it's not just even the education of it, part of it is materialism, because I want to go to this place and this place and this institution and yada yada yada, but it's overpriced. And you can, there were people who was like, I want to go to this college, I got in, but I can't afford it, so I'm gonna have to go here. Because I can, even though I want that degree from there, it's not worth it. You know what I'm saying? Like, my first year in college was 1997, and there was a guy talking about uh, either the magna cum laude or the summa cum laude at Tulane University, graduating and giving a speech, and he was like, "Hey man, I'm scared because though I've made this accomplishment, I'm $250,000 in debt." That's 97. You get what I'm saying? 97. You got to remember, when President Obama was on the trail for being on a campaign trail, he talked about how when he had that bestseller, that's what actually got him out of student loan debt. He was in his 50s. So things ain't what they used to be, man. That's true, but you got to cut this materialism down. It ain't worth this. The fun on the front end that you might have is not worth the suffering on the back end. But I'm gonna leave it at that. You tell me what you think. Like, share, subscribe. Catch you on the next one. Peace.